Hey, welcome back to Spearfactor. Today we have our special guest, Paul Rodriguez from Hotrod Spearguns. Well, welcome to the show, Paul.
How's it going? Glad to be here.
First of all, let me just say thanks for agreeing to do this. Paul and I were on a trip in December to go diving, and I was like, hey, man, it would be really cool to have you on the show because your guns are really good and unique. And and I'd like to promote your guns or whatever. And you being a true, I don't know, I respect it because being the true silent professional, so to speak, is like, yeah, not so much. And it wasn't quite like that, but I was like, no, that's fine, that's cool. And then you hit me up. You're like, hey, I was in a bad mood. We had shitty diving.
It was like, a bad trip.
I was cracking up, dude, because I was just like, I totally get it. Yeah, it's fine. Whatever you want to do. No pressure. So anyways, thanks for coming on, man.
Of course, man. Yeah, super pumped to be here, man.
Yeah. And I will say Paul's guns, you guys hear me promote it in the beginning of the podcast. And I recommend his guns to all my friends and anybody that asks because I truly think, and this isn't a friggin' infomercial for Hotrod Spearguns, but I'm not going to blow smoke up anybody's ass. But I truly think that your gun is the best gun, like for your buck, just the best gun in general. But like you're talking about, the price point is awesome for the normal dude, I guess, or girl, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how did you get into, let's start with your background. You're from Coronado. I guess, but let's get all the way in the background because I know you're not from Coronado necessarily. So just let's find out who Paul Rodriguez is.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me, dude. So for me, spearfishing is aside from my family is my entire life. If you ask anybody, I'm probably talking about spearfishing to people who don't want to hear about spearfishing almost every minute of the day. My life revolves around my family and spearfishing. Essentially, my job is a side note at this point. I love my job, but I don't find as much joy in my job as I do spearfishing. It started from a very young age. I was a military brat, and I grew up. Fortunately, I grew up around the water almost my entire life. So I got into spearfishing in Hawaii when we were on Oahu for about 3 years there. My dad had already started doing it. And I was pretty young, man. I mean, I was only 6 years old, 5 years old, but my dad took me out, when he thought it was right, and I started with a 3-prong, the way that I think every Spearo should start. We can kind of get into like the aspect of hunting and fish sense, but I think that's what it teaches you. And then I kind of from there, went back to California here and there. My dad got stationed there. Did a little bit of fishing in California, went down to South America, did a little bit more there. I started, I was building things. That's just how I grew up. I mean, I always was working with my hands. And in middle school, I just started messing around with whatever scraps I could find, started building guns, wanted to test it out in the pool and take it in the water. And as I grew up, I had more opportunity to continue building. My dad, I pretty much attribute anything related to spearfishing and woodworking to him. He taught me from a young age, how to do, some woodworking, and then he taught me how to dive. So kind of the love for both those things manifested together. And from there, I went in the military after high school. In high school, I'd done some spearfishing. We were back in California at the time, and in the military, I had this great opportunity to travel and spearfish some more, and that's when I really, really got serious about the woodworking and the gun building. So about 6 years ago now, I got I started to look into forming an LLC and making a business. I'd been building guns kind of for fun a few years prior to that, but I really got serious about 6 years ago. And a lot of it was just trial and error, man. I taught myself everything that I know about spearguns, building spearguns for the most part. Tons of research. I think how a lot of guys, start, and how a lot of guys, they got the means, they got the shop in the garage, or they got access to tools, and they just want to build stuff, man. And that's the nature of Spearo. A lot of Spearos are DIY type guys. You know,
Yeah, 100%.
Your podcast is a great example of that. So that whole spirit of DIY and wanting to do it yourself, and me just loving to build things and loving spearfishing, I was like, this is perfect, man. And even you know, when I was a kid, we would go back to Hawaii every now and again, and got to, you know, had the pleasure of diving with Daryl Wong, you know, a legend of the sport. My dad knew him, and the original founder of Aimrite. So my first gun was an Aimrite, and you know, great gun. I remember shooting some of those invasives in Hawaii, and it's just awesome, man. Like just growing up, my dad allowing me, like pushing me to continue spearfishing and get me in the water. So, you know, in California, we'd take trips to Baja. We were fortunate enough to get out to SCI a few times, and then out to Hawaii. That was kind of the foundation for me diving wise. And then I think a big turning point for me as far as diving was I took a PFI course out at Catalina, and I, you know, I was 17, I think, and first time I hit 100 feet, I was like, this is insane. Like, there's so much more to get better at. And you know, that's another thing that I just think is, you can always get better at anything. So I apply that to the guns, and I apply it to the spearfishing. You can always improve, essentially in anything. But yeah, man. So that's kind of where it started. You know, my dad essentially is the one who did all that for me.
No, that's epic. That's that whole sense of like progression is what I think drives so many of us. I don't know. I don't want to say like a man's man, so to speak, because there's a lot of women that kill stuff too, and I'm sure they're the same way. But it's yeah, I mean, like my stupid floats that I made, but like everything, you know what I mean? Bro, everything is like, why don't you just buy it off the shelf? Because I don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I shot my fish with the gun that I made, and you've seen it, it ain't pretty at all. But you know what, motherfucker, it's mine. And no, you know what I mean? And like,
it does the job, man.
Yeah, and it feels like it's some sort of like primitive thing in your mind that's like, if I got stuck on an island, dude, I would thrive, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And my wife would be like sitting there like, damn, I'm lucky to be on an island with this crazy bastard or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, so no, it's funny you say all that, because like you were saying with the guns, right? A spear gun, you know, my friend Colin told me a long time ago, like probably, I don't know, 20 years ago now, he's like, if you have a 2x4, a piece of wood with a straight track, it's gonna shoot straight. Okay, just get a straight track. There's not much to it. But now you're talking about, like, we're talking rollers and travel guns and all this other stuff that, like, why? I don't know why. Just because we're just designed that way. So many of us are, you know? Yeah. And, so let's talk a little bit about, when you mentioned 3-prong though, like getting this, pole spear, a 3-prong, like what, and you did mention, you know, hunting sense and all that stuff. Like, is that something that you experience? Like, can you kind of talk us through like your experience with it?
Yeah. So the way I view spearfishing, I kind of break it down into 3 main categories. I like to break it down into the free diving aspect, right? You got to be a good free diver if you want to, you know, shoot bigger fish, and safety. Kind of, I would say safety, obviously, the umbrella term over all of this. So you got your free diving aspect of it, right? You want to continuously improve as a free diver. So, and it's not something that you should rush, but everybody's got a different learning curve. You know, you got guys that are quick learners and can hit 100 feet after maybe a year of diving, dude, and they're doing it safely. And I think that comes down to the right coaching. And then the second aspect I would say is being able to manipulate your weapon, the spear gun or whatever weapon you have. I think it's the sad thing about the spearfishing community in my eyes right now is a lot of guys skip straight to the gun, and they don't have a really good background as far as how to handle it, you know, and then using the gun for the right job. Because I think that guns do have this range of, you know, fish that they can handle, or, you know, the environment they can handle. But there's not one gun that can literally do everything, right? You can't have a whole gun that also shoots Dogtooth Tuna. You gotta have an arsenal, but you also have to start the right way. So that's where the 3-prong comes in. And that also ties into the third section, which I would say is you're hunting your fish sense. So fish sense, and I think this one's actually the most important. I call it fish sense, but it's really just your ability to keep your heart rate down and your ability to read an animal and not scare it. So you hear these amazing divers like Kurt Connell talking to be a turtle, and I think that aspect of controlling yourself, as far as you don't want to upset the environment. You're there to take one fish and then go home and eat it. And then reading the fish as far as their behavior, right? So you're reading the bait fish. If you're doing blue water hunting, you're reading the bait fish and you're reading, the mid layer fish. And then you know when to dive, right? It just turns into this okay, I'm going to dive now because I think that this species is going to be here at this time. It's just this, it's almost like this sixth sense, man. You have to just develop that over time. And I think that's actually the hardest. I think fish sense is the hardest thing to develop as a Spearo. And it's the hardest thing to teach too. But with the right coaching, I've seen guys in a year or two go from diving for tiny little parrotfish to shooting 195-pound doggies. Dude, it's this insane. It's that learning curve.
It's almost it's almost like Neo in the Matrix, where you look down. No, seriously, when you look down, right, and you see your rainbow runners, or you see blacksmith, or you see oh, they're all up in this current, and there's a line right there, and it's I'm gonna watch that fish, and the minute they move this way, first of all, the first thing is okay, this is the fishy spot. If they're gonna be here, they're gonna be here. But then you watch those bait fish and you watch them swim, and did they look concerned in their eyes? That whole thing, after a while, you just can look at it and read the whole environment. And like you said, I guess it does take time, but if someone can mentor you and hint you hey, you see that? That's what we're looking for. And then but for me, I didn't really have too much of that. It was just just get in the water, dude, figure it out. And and it worked. It was cool. It took a long time, but hey, I feel much more well-rounded, I guess. But the one thing you mentioned though was gun choice, and I kind of want to talk about that too because, I just did that little article around diving in the Merc, and people ask what kind of gun do you use, and it's well, what kind of fish are you hunting? You see a 70-pound dogtooth, or 70-pound white sea bass, in 5 feet of viz. I don't need a 64-inch gun. I need literally and I talk about people if you're hunting or a kill house, I know you're kind of familiar, you're going to clear a room or something, you're going to clear an area. You don't need a long rifle, so depending on what you're going for, you might need a pistol version of a spear gun, or you might need a shotgun. So you need to have, something maneuverable that you can put a hole into something that's big, close. And, so can we talk a little bit about that? And then kind of tie that into what you have, in your line of guns? Yeah,
absolutely. So with, I think the endless search as a gun builder is to find that gun, right? To find the gun that does everything. Who knows if it'll ever be found, but, I think guys are on the right track as far as trying to build a gun that can do the most. Because you got your outliers, right? You got your hole guys, you got your guys who shoot in holes all day long, and they don't need a 120, 130. And you got your guys that are pelagic hunters and they just love shooting big fish. And obviously you need some power there, right? So, when I talk to a guy, the first question I ask, if it's a newer diver, the first question I ask is what's your target species, and the second question is what's your environment. Those are the two questions I always ask, because then I can gauge, all right, this guy needs this gun. So in that respect, if I am gonna give a guy all around gun, It's still dependent on environment. So if I'm going to give a guy in California an all-around gun, it's probably going to be something closer to a mid-handle 110, 120, because you can get a 110 mid-handle in some pretty tight spaces, but you can also shoot, yellowtail and patties and stuff like that, right? You got a little more maneuverability there. If I'm talking to a guy who's fishing out in some remote islands in the Pacific, I'm more likely to lean to a rear handle 120, 130, because a lot of guys need a little more range. The fish are a lot more skittish. That's another thing where you got to gauge in clear water. You got smart fish, especially in places like Hawaii and Guam, where you got really good divers who can hit 120 feet for 3.5 minutes. You got to have some range. So, that's kind of where I tend to lean as far as gun choices and who's hunting with it.
Yeah, and I think it goes much deeper even than that, where it's like you're talking about like, okay, hunt pelagics and you need range, right? And something with power. But if you're taking a 25 foot shot on a yellowtail, it's going to need a totally different gun than taking a 25 foot shot on a tuna, you know? And so like, I tried to make a couple of guns work that I'm like, well, just recently I took a 63-inch rear handle out to shoot 3-band to shoot with sea bass, and the viz was 5 feet, and the thing came so close to me, it was like I can't even shoot this thing until it starts swimming away. Well, it wasn't 5 feet to begin with, but yeah.
Yeah, no, man, that's just a tough situation, and you almost get this feel that the fish they know before you're in their environment, so. You take what you think is right, and you're almost always underprepared. So the best thing you can do is prep your gear.
Yeah.
Over prepare. Yeah. I mean, you get every little meticulous detail matters. I like to recommend guys do some target practice. If they're unfamiliar with, let's say a guy's like, hey man, I'm a pipe gun shooter, but I want to switch to wood gun and close track. I'm like, all right, man. It's gonna shoot straight, but you should probably do 1 or 2 shots on foam or something beforehand, just to, or if you're chumming, man, shoot your chum, right? So
yeah,
I have no problem with shooting one fish for chum, right? And getting a practice run in. It's first dive of the day. If it's slow, if it's fast, you don't want to waste your shot on the chum. But I recommend guys do a little bit of target practice. I mean, for my job, obviously, my job. We practice on the range all the time, right? I think the same thing applies. You're going out to kill a target. You should be successful, and the way to ensure success is to go out and practice. So, I think it's really important, man.
Yeah, it's it's that whole like drill, so that I think that the biggest thing too that I come across is just confidence, and for some reason, if you doubt yourself one bit, when you bring that gun up, you're going to wait a little extra and you're going to shoot like shit, because you're not really, with a spear gun, you're not really even aiming it. You're bringing it up and firing. And it's like the longer you aim it with those longer guns, that front end floats around. And the confidence is everything.
Yeah. And that's where the physics of the relationship between the wood and the ballast and the balance of the gun in relation to the salt water, that plays heavily on that too. So that's where, when you do invest in a higher end gun, you expect that, right? You should be able to point your gun out, and it should feel like there's nothing there. It should feel weird. My buddy JP talked to me the other day. He's like, man, I sent one of our other guys a gun, and he hit me up the other day, and he's like, dude, it was crazy. Like, I just it felt weird. Like, it should feel weird that you're pointing this gun out, and you should feel nothingness. It should feel light and airy, man. That's what you're gonna get that's what I like about the wood guns. You're able to control that. You have more control over how the gun acts in the water. So, and that takes tons of time to research and develop, but it's another important aspect about shooting a gun.
Yeah, I hope the rest of the world is listening, because we get a lot of shit for having our giant wooden guns. from around the world. It's all good, but yeah, that was the thing that impressed me about your gun is when we were where we were down in Baja, it didn't see many fish, but I wanted, same thing. I wanted to shoot your gun, and I remember like it was a pretty far shot, and it was like I think it was like a friggin' opal eye or something. But I wanted to bring that thing up, fired, and I hit it, and I was like, God damn, like that thing. No, I mean, excuse me, I guess. It was interesting because it did, like you said, it didn't feel like anything. And at that time, I kind of, copped it up to like, oh, it's the hybrid. It's that carbon fiber tubing. So it's a little bit more smoother. There's less resistance in the water and it's lighter, or it's more balanced. But yeah, that was the thing that like that one shot, I was like, wow, I just brought that up and shot that thing from like 20 feet away. And, yeah. And not to mention that, but also like down in Guam with the guys and trying their guns and using your gun on some Dogtooth. It was just like, but that travel hybrid that I used, that thing was like, yeah, that really impressed me probably the most out of any gun I've shot in a long time.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is what it is. Like, do you want to go into that a little bit? Like what you're working on, your projects?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start out with the concept of a hybrid because I get tons of questions on why hybrid, man? Because some people hate the look, and that's fine. Everybody's got their preference, but why a hybrid? I grew up. Yeah, so after my aim right, my next gun was a Dura Wong, which I actually still own. It was a gift from my dad for graduating my pipeline, and I like Daryl, man. He's a good dude, but his guns are great. He's got a great product. And the thing about a hybrid is you're melding the benefits of a pipe gun with the benefits of a wood gun if you do it right, in my opinion. So the way I look at it is you want that maneuverability on the muzzle. With a wood gun, you can never ever get a piece of wood that thin safely, right? You're gonna bend the wood's gonna bend or break. With a carbon fiber or even an anodized aluminum tube. You get that maneuverability, which you noticed on the travel hybrid there. And the other thing, and this is the way I approach my hybrid specifically, is I like to beef up that wood area. And the reason I like to beef it up is because you have to add weight, right? You add wood, you add weight, like you have to. So what that weight does, not only does it ballast, but adding weight to the gun is a counter to the recoil, right? So with a hybrid, a lot of guys complain, "Oh man, my hybrid, I like it, but it punches so hard, dude." So when I initially started building them, I was like, I need to figure out a way to get more weight in the gun. So just fatten up the back stock, add some weight, and with 3 9/16 bands, and we can get into the difference, with 9/16, 5/8. Or 14 mil, 16 mil for our Euro friends. With the difference there, is pretty amazing, man. I mean, with 9/16 bands, they tend to, in my opinion, they tend to wear out a little faster, but they have some snap, man, and they can sling that shaft pretty far, and they also don't cause as much recoil. Even with 2 5/8 bands versus 3 9/16, you'll notice that the recoil isn't very much different. So when you're adding that weight in the back of the hybrid, and you're adding that thin muzzle, it just creates a good product, in my opinion. So, and I love wood guns too, man. I alternate between my wood and hybrids all the time.
The one thing, like you're saying, with putting the weight in that rear part of the gun, when you go to swing it, it's way easier to swing because it's just so much more. You're not swinging around this big, heavy front or even the middle of the gun.
Yep.
Yeah, the pivot point totally changes.
Absolutely. And even with a hybrid, you can put a little bit of weight in the muzzle, and there's a noticeable difference. So I tend to put weight in the muzzle. I lathe out my own wood muzzles, so there is a little bit of you do have to counteract that wood a little bit, especially with the carbon fiber tubes. But with the travel hybrids, actually, so I built a hybrid about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. It was a pretty old gun, and I basically had primitive design as far as I never, it was my own gun. I basically, the tube could come out, and it was by accident. But I kind of sat on the idea for a couple of years, and I look back at it with my job, jumping out of airplanes, working on helicopters. Like I get put in some pretty remote locations here and there, and I was like, man, that would be so cool if I could put a spear gun, my fins inside of a ruck, and jump it out of an airplane. That was the initial thought, right?
Nice.
Obviously, I can't do that for work. Maybe one day, but so I was looking at that. I was like, well, on a boat, or if I'm on an airplane, like, why not? And I think the modular guns had started to become a thing, but I hadn't really heard of it. So I was like, all right, let's look at this. How do I create this hybrid that I can break down but not blow up on me? Right? That's the scariest thought. So I put about 2 to 3 years of R&D into it, and luckily I was living next to the ocean at the time, and I had tons of time to research it. And what I came up with was basically the lead up to it was I come up with a product now that's overbuilt. There's some stuff that you could operate without in my hybrid, so I put the 2 bolts in there and the ferruled tube. If I just put screws in, it would work too. That ferruled tube is where all the pressure is. So
the pins too, right? You could just put it in like pins, like pop pins.
Yeah,
right?
You could totally do pins, but the problem with pins is if you were taking them in and out, you need like some kind of mechanism to get them in, punch them in and out, and the wood will swell. If
right.
You could do a half-inch hole and pour epoxy and then drill through the epoxy where the pin is, and that would work fine. But guys are more likely to carry a screwdriver with them than something to punch out. So that was another thought I had. I was like, guys will carry a screwdriver or an Allen key this small, a hex key, whatever you like to call it. So I was like, all right. So what I've done essentially is I've got these nuts and bolts in there. I don't want to go too much into it, but basically, guys, all they have to travel, and I usually put an extra bolt in there in case they lose it. But you travel around with your gun, and the shaft breaks down too, and that's you just take your Allen key, pop the 2 bolts out, and you're done, man. It takes 2 minutes. I mean, you've seen the videos, so yeah, man. That was the whole concept, and at this point, down the road, 2.5. Well, now I'm about 4 years down the road from the initial design. I've got something that I really enjoy, dude. I love taking it around, and I've put it together on a jet ski. I've put it together in some pretty crazy spots, but just to see, I had to see. That was all part of the R&D process.
So you mentioned the whole 9/16 versus 5/8. Like, so you do all 9/16 on your guns?
So on the travel guns, I and the hybrids, I do 9/16.
Yeah.
The reason being is there is that weak spot in the gun naturally. When you're bonding the tube and the wood section together. Granted, I've never had a gun malfunction that way, because it's just overbuilt. I didn't even want to mess. I didn't even want to entertain that. So the joint on both the regular hybrid, the non-travel version, and the travel version is a pretty. I've stood on it. So you can. And there's like barely, when I stand on it, it's like almost no flexion still. It's a pretty tight joint. And it's all about the carbon fiber joint, man. That took a lot of work to figure out, how to get the tube in there. And I mean, that takes, so the travel guns take a lot of extra time to build.
Yeah.
But it's worth it in my opinion. I love building the guns, man. I love the concept. I love being able to be inventive with a spear gun. That's, to me, that's the whole motivation.
So do you have the problem where, like, so this is why I hate building guns, though. First of all, I'm not really like experienced at woodworking at all, but like when you're building a gun or guns, I know you guys, like you and Nick from Nitro, you guys build them in like just big masses at a time. Do you stay up at night like 2 a.m. like I do and like think about like, oh dude, what if trying to think about like how to make things work or tweak it, or, stressed out about is the epoxy curing right, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably lose about 7 hours of sleep a week just thinking about guns. And I work from 8 to 12 or 9 to 1 depending on the day. So 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. So I work 4 hours a night on the weekdays. I lose a lot of sleep because of spear guns. Luckily on the weekends I get to work during the day, which is nice. But yeah, man, I lose a ton of sleep over spear guns, but that's the nature of having two jobs.
Yeah, no. So you're saying you use 9/16 on your travel guns, and that's mainly because with the 9/16 it's a little lighter of a load. Is that why than the 5/8?
Yeah. So with the poundage of the bands, you're putting a little bit more stress on the joint itself with 3 5/8 bands as opposed to 3 9/16 bands.
Okay.
That's kind of a standard with hybrids too. I don't think many builders. So my standard hybrids, I'll put 3 5/8 on, but the travel ones, I like to put 3 9/16 on.
Yeah.
Just because inherently the joint is slightly weaker because you have
right.
And with the tubes, the space is negligible, non-existent. It's enough space for you to slide the tube in without difficulty, but that's it. There's no extra playroom. But you don't want to overload the gun. Yeah. And I've noticed that with the 3 9/16 bands, you probably lose 2 feet, maybe 2 feet. With fresh bands, it's almost negligible. So the caveat to 9/16 bands is that you have to replace them a little bit quicker. From what I've seen, they tend to stretch out a little faster.
Yeah. Interesting. No, that's okay. That's pretty wild. I've kind of noticed too, like most gun builders really are kind of going away from the 5/8 too. They just really like the snappiness of the 9/16.
Yeah, I think guys are more willing to redo their bands, to put new bands on more frequently, to stick with the heavy bands. And guys, people don't love recoil on a spear gun. Combating recoil is a difficult issue on its own. And I think that guys are okay with 9/16. They're okay with losing a foot, right? And that also comes down to just improving yourself as a diver, getting closer to the fish, etc. You don't need most of the shots that we take. I would say 95 to 98% of the shots that we take, if you notice, you're overpowered anyways.
I mean, I was talking to Chris Coates about this. Like, they're like 10 feet. Like, how many times you really like reach the end of your shooting line? And like my dad says, he's like, "Hey, Brett, firepower is hits on the target. If you're putting rounds down range and you don't hit a goddamn thing, it doesn't really matter." So
yep. Exactly.
I'll switch to the 9/6 because that's the recoil, man, is the one thing that throws off, especially on rear handles if you have strong recoil, because you just don't have as much control. Yeah.
There's a few ways to combat the recoil, ballast being the number one. So you want to have a weight to band ratio. 3 pounds. 3 pounds about is the running number as far as your weight of your gun with the shaft in to the amount of bands you have. So 2 pounds per band. That's a heavy gun, man. So there's, I like to bring it down a little bit because the recoil, you could bring it down to 2.5 pounds per band. It's also negligible. Obviously with the rollers, that's a whole different issue. There's, and then the other thing that you can do to combat recoil is actually your handles. You guys, you can upgrade to something that's a little more ergonomic. More surface area on your palm. If guys are having issues, they can upgrade their handle. If they got like the AR-15 handle, you can buy a handle, or if you want to get a gun with a shaped wood handle. If a builder can do that. So like I'll offer that to guys who are like really don't like recoil. Like, hey man, let's do an ergonomic handle for you because your more surface area of your hand is going to be on that gun, so you can handle more recoil.
I swear by the custom handles. I mean, I made my own, and again, I didn't know anything about it. I was like, I'm just going to make everything custom, make this whole thing my gun. Yep. And when you grab that thing and it's custom, and I guess the problem is for me, I'm left-handed, so like not that many people can use it. But when you grab it and your hand just molds into the gun, like that goes back to what you're talking about, where it feels like it's just an extension of you. And I've never made, like, I just feel like one-handed shots, like lasers, just with that gun is just, your hand is just, I mean, you can tell, you know, anybody that's ever tried it knows, like, when you put your hand on a custom mold, it's like, oh, okay.
That's good.
Yeah, It feels real good. Yeah.
Yeah. With the challenge for a gun builder is to find something that's ergonomic yet applies to more than one person, right? You know, a lot of people.
Yeah. That's true.
That's the other reason that I like the AR-15. You can, if you're a lefty, you can buy a lefty ergonomic style handle, right? So my approach to gun building is you want to make as much of that gun modular as you can, right? So I like to use where you can tie the wishbones in and replace bands as you go, the replaceable handle, and that obviously applies to, then the modular portion obviously applies to the travel guns. There's just, as much as you can manipulate to make the gun personalized. And that's to me the difference between getting a wood gun and getting a pipe gun, because that's where having 5 different types of guns or 6 different types of guns in your inventory, you can cater to people's needs. So, you got a guy who's like, hey, I do some blue water, I do a lot of reef hunting. Well, I'm like, all right, man, let's get you a slightly beefed up wood gun that can handle, what you want.
We talked about travel guns. Let's get into Paul, the diver. Like, what is your goals this year? I know, like, do you mind telling everybody your current situation where you are?
Yeah. So in the military, I don't choose where I go. I'm in South Georgia, but I'm close to the coast. It's close enough to go fish every once in a while. Family life and working 2 jobs has me pretty busy, so fishing has gone down of late, sadly. But I still get to kind of get my fix with the spear guns. I would say desires as far as next spearfishing trip. Well, man, I'd like to explore Florida just because it's a spot in the U.S. Has great diving, and I haven't had too much of an opportunity. I've dove Florida a few times. I've dove the Keys, I've dove the Gulf, and I've dove the Atlantic side, and they all got something different to offer. So I'm excited to just explore that portion of the U.S. I think that a good spearo should, if he can, broaden his inventory as far as places traveled. In the future, I think that there's some epic trips to be had halfway around the world. I think I'd really like to get out to Africa again and spearfish. Man, that place is just it's awesome.
We talked about that. I'm not going to mention anywhere specific, but holy shit, that was insane. That was absolutely insane.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's crazy out there, man. It's just it's completely so different, and the variety is amazing, and the fishing is amazing, and it's just a part of the world that if I think something I said to my buddy the other day is the traveling spearo ends up being a better spearfisherman, whether you like it or not. Someone who's able to travel and kind of build that inventory just ends up being a better spearfisherman, and it makes it better back in your home waters. So.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Traveling, if you can go to places and learn and adapt, and then it makes you way more diverse, but then also you can see common denominators throughout the world, and also learn like multiple, let's just say, for example, if you hunt yellowtail here and then you go to Japan or you go somewhere else like kingfish or whatever, and even if you go from the Sea Cortez side to the Pacific side, it doesn't necessarily mean those fish are going to act the same way at all. Like those fish could be like, wiggling your fingers might work on the Pacific side, and it's not going to do anything on the Sea Cortez side. So it's like what I found even in Guam, like the difference between Guam and Hawaii, certain things in Guam don't work and certain things in Hawaii work. So now you start building like this repertoire, like stuff like that you can just try. And then you get back to you get back to here and it's like, oh, I know yellowtail are just as curious as like, whatever, uku or something, or like mahi or whatever. And so you can try those like cross species tactics. And it works. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love like it's a good comparison there. Like let's say you're hunting uku in Hawaii, green jobfish, and you go back to California, you got whitefish there. They kind of act the same. They like that deep
Right.
sand. They're a little bit standoffish, and you lay in the sand or you have the right approach. Obviously, with uku, like chumming is a big deal, but there's definitely like ways you can apply your previous experiences, and yeah, that's what I'm talking about, man. It just makes a well-rounded Spearo.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely kind of what you're talking about. Some places on the other side of the world, different places that are like, I mean, on the map, and I'm like, okay, I got to get there somehow. Like, I know this guy, and I'm gonna go all in here. I know there's some world records shot here, and I heard it through the grapevine, and this and that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going there,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other side of it is too. It's like, and you being a military guy, and I'm always like looking back and saying, what's the most dangerous part of the world possible that has an ocean? Because I know
Yep.
nobody goes there, and that place has got to be loaded.
Yep. That resonates with me, man. Like the places that are the least accessible, end up having the most fish. And so what it usually requires is opportunity or money
Yes.
to get there.
Yeah. Both. Yeah. So if you look on your Instagram, anybody that knows you and your boys, slay, rather big sized dogfish and you like coral trout. And is that what you say that's your favorite fish to hunt is dogtooth or?
Yeah, bar none. Dogtooth tuna is, in my opinion, the ultimate hunt as a Spearo. Because a lot of fish, the fight ends. The job is done when you've got a relatively well placed shot fish, right? I'll be honest, man. Doggies have given me the highest highs and the lowest lows.
That's what makes it so special. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's what brings you back. It turns in it's a sick obsession, I think, for a lot of us, man. My wife loves to make fun of me, and for good reason, man. But doggies are, I'd say, bar none, most difficult fish to land in the world, and they're also the thing about doggies that's surprised me was like a lot of fish you kind of know, all right, this time of year, and this and this is going on in the ocean, the tide, the moon, whatever. Like, you generally know, yeah, this is a good time to go get that fish. Wahoo are pretty predictable fish, right? Doggies, though, it kind of just depends, man. Like, wherever you go, like they have their little niche, they have their little time when they like to come out, and it's not always the same. So doggies require you to be in that place for a while to develop like that relationship, to develop that like the know. So that's the most difficult thing about them. And then once you get on them, luckily they're nearly impossible to land, especially the big ones, man. I mean, I had a probably about a 150 pounder. I'm not gonna blow it up more than it was. Maybe about a 150-pound doggy. And I'm on this wall, and we hadn't seen much. I shot one small doggy that day, and I dived down, dude. And I plugged this thing. I mean, I thought I was in the bag, dude. But he brought my Gannett 75, my Gannett 100, and an Evolve. I don't remember what size it was. It was the mid-size Evolve. He brought all three underwater. I was at the wall, dropped off to about 120, 140 feet. And
where was the shot place in the gill plate?
So I shot him. I thought I was at an angle, but it was. So I like to shoot him, in around the pec fin or kind of the soft meat around the pec fin and out the gill plate, or just behind the gill plate on one side and out the gill plate on the other. And I think my shot was probably too perpendicular. So I think what I did is I shot him just above the pec fin, above the spine, and it went straight out. The shaft. It wasn't a far shot. We were talking about the close shots. It was, I had my big Betty, that water ballasted gun, and I just absolutely blasted this thing. I watched this doggy bring down 3 floats, and he came back up for a sec, was still on, and then I watched him saw himself in half. I literally watched this doggy split in half from the spine up, with the spear. So what happened was I always use cable with doggies. There's nothing else I think that works, and the reason is because doggies love to get down to the reef and love to tear your shit up. Aussie Rewline's great, but for blue water and for reef on smaller fish. But if you put an Aussie Rewline on the reef, eventually a big doggy like that's just going to shred it. And this doggy just pigtailed my slip tip, and it tore my crap apart, dude. And he sawed himself in half, and I just watched him just kind of limp away. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. I was pretty heartbroken after that.
Now that's that. God, man, I just hearing the stories, and like we all have I think some of us has those stories, but like it's I guess that's what makes it so incredible. Where when you land that fish, and I'm about to lose my shit and cry because of everything, of the heartache, the highs, the lows, and everything that goes into it, and like. The cable thing, because I was talking to Chris Coates about that too, and I said, cable, because of the sharks, and like you said, like they are, man, they always try to wrap up on the reef, and he was like, yeah, we just use Dynamo, we don't use cable. But him being as well-rounded as he is, he's like, it just depends on where you're hunting, like maybe at our drop-offs, it's not, they don't manage to get that on those ledges, the ledges aren't as fierce, but yeah, I'm not, when I make my equipment or whatever it is, like, I know you're the same way because you mentioned it, like, I overdo everything. I'm not fucking around. Yeah. Because if a whale swims in front of me, a whale of a bluefin or something, I'm blasting that thing. And I know that my equipment's going to hold up. And Brandon Waller's kind of said the same thing because that's why he custom rigs all stuff because of that. But more importantly, like you're saying, the shot placement and like, and on this show a lot, I've talked to guys and the tuna gets brought up the most, like the dogtooth. And I'm sure people that haven't had a chance to travel, they're probably like, I can't relate to this shit. And I'm telling you that you kind of can relate in the sense that your dogtooth tuna, when you're starting out, might be a white sea bass. And it also might be a bluefin tuna right off the coast. And the same thing's going to apply as far as getting humbled when you put 30 pounds of float on your float and tag a 200-pound tuna. I've done it. I've seen it, like, where it just sounds and bye-bye all your shit. So take it from everybody about these fish. And the other thing about dogtooth tuna is nobody talks about that much. It's like, it is the coolest looking fish.
Oh, dude, I love those white spots.
The white, you always see the white. It's like, is that a shark? No, there's the white spot. And then the teeth, and it's like, it looks like a monster. And then the thing is, it looks like a monster, but it fights just like a monster. So like everything about it is legit. And then you were also talking about, you kind of never know what's going to show up with the dogtooth. It's kind of hard to figure them out. And what I found, it's like, you don't ever know what size dogtooth is going to show up. It's like, I might know dogtooth will be there, but it could be a 25-pounder, or it could be an 8-foot one that my buddy Rob saw chasing after the 25-foot pounder. It looked like a goddamn 300-pound shark, and it turned out to be an 8-foot dogtooth. It's man, it's a trip,
dude. Yeah, they're impressive fish, man. I mean, you see them. You know when they're big, when they're dark and they waddle. We always say that. Me and my buddies. It's just like you see that waddle, you see that submarine, dude. And a lot of times they're doing that flyby, those big ones, the smart ones, and oftentimes you're ill prepared when that big one swims up, or they're smart enough to just check you out and bail. And you can never. Yeah, you're right. You never know what you're gonna see. You can never be too ready. You just hope that you are when the time comes. Obviously that applies to any fish. But with doggies, it really is something special. I had another funny story about doggies. I had an epic day, man. I shot, 50-pound doggy. It was a really good day. It was just going off. I mean, I probably saw 300 or 400 doggies that day, maybe more. And, my buddy goes down and he actually misses a long shot on probably a 140, 150. It was a good sized doggy. And, and these two other ones cruised by, and I just reloaded. I just shot a pretty big amberjack. So I had an amberjack and a good sized doggy in the boat, and these two swim down deep, right? 100. This one was 111 pounds. At that time, it was my biggest doggy. Stoned him. I'm feeling good. Taking it. So we had our buddy is a photographer, so he had an underwater setup. Get in the water, taking a picture with the camera, and I have all these pictures, and he's taking the pictures, and I'm just doing all the stupid poses with the doggy, and 50 wahoo, school wahoo swims up behind us. So this day was just going off, dude. There were fish everywhere, and I'm like, toss me a gun. So that all of our guns were all shit show on the boat. Luckily, there was a real gun, and I got a relatively long shot off on this 40 or 50 pound wahoo. Landed that as I'm pulling this wahoo in. Probably 200 pound, maybe 190 pound, pretty large doggy, dude. Swims up, and he's dwarfing the sharks that are swimming around.
When you say swims up, like how close are you talking? Like,
he came probably within 10 feet of me.
Yeah.
My buddy was in the water too, and he didn't have a gun. He was just he was helping me get the stuff back in the boat at that point. And this 200 pounder just comes circling up from the bottom, and all I could do was stare at it, man. It was awesome. Like it was just like this hilarious thing where I had such a good day, I couldn't complain, right? But my buddy hadn't shot anything that day. He missed that one earlier, and he didn't get another opportunity, and we're just both staring at this 200 pound doggy dude just dwarfing all the sharks around us, and
so cool.
Just laughing, man. Like it's crazy. That's kind of what I appreciate about it too, man. Like, you got to know when you're satisfied. You got to know when you're done.
It's about being in the presence of the whole thing, right? Like,
yeah.
It's not necessarily like you said. I was talking about this the other day, or thinking about it, or whatever. Just and I was diving, and I saw like 4 white sea bass or whatever, and one of them, because he was so close, I just kind of put my gun, tucked it in, and I just kind of swam with him. Because it's the first white sea bass I've seen in years. Because I was deployed or whatever. So I was like, okay, cool. And I just I came home with kind of a grin on my face. And my wife's like, did you see one? I'm like, yeah, I saw 4. She's like, did you get one? I'm like, no. I go, you know what? I don't even give a shit. Like, it was pretty cool, Yeah. And, those.
Sometimes just,
the doggy's big when the sharks kind of veer out of the way. Like, I've seen it, like, when you shoot a big dog and the sharks just bolt. And you're like, oh, you're supposed to be going for the fish. No, you don't want any part of it. Like, okay.
Yeah, man. When you got, like, a couple sharks around, maybe it's not too sharky, and you just see all these little sharks. You're like, I'm not trying to eat that dude right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that stuff.
I mean, there are sharks that don't give a shit, but as far as some of them, like, I've definitely seen, like, the majority of them, like, just bug out as soon as you shoot it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good feeling too, because you're like, all right, I got something big on the line. Because you may approach it, and take your shot, and not even know what you just shot. Like you're like, I think I know how big that is, and then the nice thing about doggies is a lot of times, they end up wet. They're thick, man.
And it's clear water.
Yeah. You get some long and skinny ones. It's funny, like there's a couple, male or female, maybe the fatter ones. Like there's ones that just burst out, and there's ones that are really long and they're lighter colored, I've noticed. And then you got ones that have like the big eyes or the small eyes and the big teeth, the small teeth. Like I just, it's crazy for us. Like with the doggies we were shooting, we noticed that in our area of the world that the ones with the big teeth and the small eye were the big boys. Like the ones that got up past 200 pounds or close to that were generally small eye, big teeth, dark color. And then the ones that were kind of longer and lighter gray were usually the smaller ones with the tiny teeth. But it could go both ways, man. Just you try to figure the fish out. You end up realizing you know nothing at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's all theory, right?
It's all theory, man. It's all
That's
theory,
like if you look at people, right? Like, yeah, people like to go to In-N-Out, okay, but there are those random weirdos that don't like to go In-N-Out or whatever, dude. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I don't want to wait in that line, but I mean, there's a lot of people that don't like certain. So those, I'm sure that happens in the animal kingdom as well. Hey, so what tips do you have? Like, so this happened to us more often than not with the big dogs, seeing them at depth, just cruise by, wanting no part of anything. Did you have any tips as far as getting them to stay around, other than like?
I mean, flashers are your friend, man. Yeah, flashers and current are probably the two most common, common denominators as far as doggies went for us. If you don't have current, if you don't got bait, might as well just kind of look at another area if you can. And then to get them to stick around. Most of the time, man, if they're not going to stick around, they're not going to stick around. They got that big for a reason. But I have noticed that you got a good flasher set up. Trash flash is great, man. Something that works for your environment. You want to get, like, if you're going to be hunting doggies, you should be looking for current, and you should be putting some weight on the end of your flasher. Like, you need to have some weight, right? Because if you flasher sideways in the water, you got 60 feet of mono out on your flasher, but it's sitting like this sideways in the water. You're not doing yourself any good. You gotta get those flashers in the right column in the water. So I would say those are the two biggest things. Chum, I've seen chum work as far as getting them off the bottom. You got doggies that are sitting at 150 or 120 feet. I've seen flat, especially when you start getting the ukus and the other predators come up, doggies want to come check that out too. So chum works in that respect. From what I've seen, every place is different, but I think there are some common denominators, and then I think the last thing is the bait. Read the bait. Like you want to stay in front of the bait is what we would always do, So if you got a current going in the right direction, and that also applies to the current has to be in the right direction. But when the bait sitting in the right spot, that applies to all pelagic fishing in my opinion. I've seen it applies to yellowtail. I mean, it applies to any, the predators and are going to hang out above the bait or up from the bait because they're going to come in and out, under and up, right? And the bait are going to sit in their spot and just do what bait do. So if you can read the bait, and that kind of applies to that fish sense thing.
Can you explain that a little bit, though, as far as when you say the current going the right way? Like, say if you have it set up where you have like a high spot and, or a reef or kelp head, whatever.
And this is all theory, like we said. It could be different in every part of the world, man. But from what I've seen, when you got current hitting the prominent wall or the prominent portion of a high spot, and the bait is sitting in that up current spot, that's where you want to be, man. So if you start getting dragged down current, get back in the boat or kick hard, man. I mean, where I was diving, we could shore dive with doggies, right? And I think a lot of places in the world you can. Obviously, you gotta have buddies who can handle that, and you gotta know your waters. So that takes a lot of research, a lot of time. But if you can kick up current, stay up current, man. I'd take guys out to go get doggies all the time, and if they weren't a strong swimmer, we were resetting the boat a lot more. If I had a strong swimmer with me, and you don't want to work yourself too hard and give yourself shitty dives, but if you can navigate that, then that's where you want to sit, man. Right up the bait, right up current, and if you can get a drop where you're putting the doggies, so you're keeping those flashers in between you and the doggies is ideal, and you're also sitting up current of the doggy, dude, you're floating to them. You're acting like that sea turtle. You're floating to that doggy. So that's the advice I would give to anybody who's trying to get into it. Like you have to navigate that current. Right. If you're getting pushed down, man, they're not going to come with you. They're going to stay up there. So
yeah. That was the very first experience ever going offshore when I was down in the Indo-Pacific there. Literally floating in, drop everything in, jump in, throw the float lines out, throw the flasher out, and then throw my shit on, get in the water, look at the flasher, there's a dogtooth on it. And we're just floating up before we even got to the shelf. And then you hit the shelf, and then there's rainbows, but there's also like 4. Looking back now, I didn't know any better, but those were probably like, maybe the guys would disagree with me, but I looked like they were like anywhere from 70, 80 pound. They were some, 50 healthy, and healthy dogs. And like, again, there's that learning curve, and nobody should be embarrassed by it. So this is why we're putting this information out for people to learn from it, so you don't have to like lose fish or wound fish. But I mean, shit, we had going after them with mono. As soon as they hit, oh, okay, lesson learned.
Yeah.
We had a lot of those, and yeah, my very first experience was just that. It just worked out that we were like, okay, we're just going to follow the principle, go up current. We're going to go in the blue water and drift up on the shelf. We'll see what happens. And sure enough, there they were,
yeah. And, that, like the good thing about that maneuver of diving is that applies to all pelagic fishing. Like,
right.
if you're in the right spot in the current, if you're in that sweet spot, man, you're gonna see more pelagic fish. So what we would like to do, if it was the right time of year, man, you could have wahoos, a couple hundred meters further up. So wahoo like their depth. So we would have wahoos that were in 400 feet of water, but it was such a steep drop off that 400 feet was only a couple hundred yards from the wall. Dude, put us in where the wahoo are. If we see one, we'll shoot one. And if we don't, we still gotta, we're just trying to maximize how many fish we're gonna see.
We did the exact same thing, and you could literally set your depth by what fish you saw first. It was like, oh, there's the wahoo. Oh, there's the oh, there's the mahi. There's the rainbow. Oh, there's the dogtooth.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're seeing all three of those species at the same time, obviously this applies to certain parts of the world. Like when you're seeing all three of those species at a certain time, and they're all there, you're doing the right thing. And that's
it's going to be a good day. Like
yeah.
The first time you drop in, if you see like rainbows and you're like, okay, it's on. Like, that's what we found. Like, don't even waste your time if you're not seeing them. Just leave.
Yeah, man. Yeah, rainbows are like, it's like such a good feeling when you see a nice school of rainbows just darting around. Like you're in the right spot.
Right.
And it's funny because like it's a good sign, but it's not all like that thing about doggies, man. Like just not always there. And it's such a heartbreaker when you just got some days you'll just have just so much bait action. You will have good current. And maybe you won't see them, dude. And that's the other thing about doggies. Man, just like it's all still exploratory. With a lot of the fish that like you're in California shooting yellowtail, what time of year, they're gonna be there. Like
right.
It's gonna happen. So,
but as far as where we're hunting and the fish we're hunting for, like you said, it's pretty damn new. Not that many people have done it in these certain regions. Mm-hmm. So, and like I was saying before, like I swear, like every fish is different no matter where you go on any reef. Sometimes they just have different behaviors. So, but there are the basic generic principles that apply for the most part for any pelagic fish or any fish in general, any animal really.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course.
Yeah.
Pelagic species. The nice thing about pelagics, if you do all your homework and you do see them, the shot usually isn't that hard. It's a bigger fish, and it's a 10-foot shot most of the time. And the homework, and then the ability. You're making yourself that better diver, getting your fish sense improved, getting your diving improved. Like that, if you've got all that locked down, you got your gear prep, it all comes together, man. And at the end of the day, when you got full of, you fill up your Yeti 320 or 360 doggies, you did it right. It's just, that's why we keep coming back.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time. But before we leave, I want you to tell the story of hitting the whale, the boat crash, because that is gnarly. And that's a good point, though, to tell everybody to like, hey, you never,
Yeah, like, man. I don't like, it's such a sad thing for me. Obviously I wish it never happened.
Yeah.
You learn from your mistakes. So yeah, we did our run. We had gone pretty far that day. Over 100 miles total was the trip, right? I'm within a mile of the marina. And it is whale season, but it was kind of the start of whale season. We hadn't seen many whales that day anyways. We kind of heard them out of our spot, but early on in the season. So I'm driving the boat in. I get within the shipping lane. I'm starting to get pretty close to shore. There's a lot more boats around, right? When you're that far offshore, don't see that many boats, but you start to get close and become more vigilant as the boat driver. And this is where I will touch on having your gear like tight when you come back. So put all your guns away, get your stuff cleaned up before you're starting to run back in. This came in big because I'm running. I'm at 35 knots, so I'm going pretty fast. And luckily, it's an older whaler that I'm driving. We got twin 225s on it, so we got some push, but going fast, man. And this whale just pops his dorsal, probably less than 20 yards in front of the boat, man. Maybe even less than that. It was just so fast. And I'm looking left to right. I'm seeing boats, and I'm picking my route, and I look back forward, and that's when he pops up. I basically put my hands on the throttle, and and right then is when I hit it. I couldn't pull. I didn't even have enough time to pull back. Luckily, this whale wasn't any higher in the water. If he had been higher, I probably would have died. Just how fast I was going. But what happened was I hit the whale. We ramped off of it. I bet the skag on the starboard side engine, and the impeller got all messed up too. The port side engine cleared the whale. The metal lined keel basically ramped up the whale, and I feel horrible, man.
I know. Yeah,
this happens, right? This happens.
Yeah.
Guys hit turtles. Guys hit dolphins. Dolphins not so much, but like guys hit. I was talking to some buddies from Hawaii, and they're like, yeah, dude, we hit turtles sometimes. It's so unfortunate. Anyway, so we ramp off this whale, and I hit the T-top. It's just all stainless steel, and I get knocked out. And I come to, my buddies are over me. They're like, dude, you all right? And I'm like, my first question was, I'm like trying to breathe because I got the wind knocked out of me too. I'm like, is the boat okay? And I'm just looking down. I'm on all fours at this point. I'm looking down, and there's just a pool of blood under my face. So luckily, I'm a medical, professional, but so I went to work that night. Come to find out, I got a concussion, and I had to so my buddy stitched me up that night too. Went to work just all messed up. I was dazed. I have a pretty funny picture. Whole face is swollen. My nose, I think I broke my nose. I never actually got a diagnosis on it, but it was all crackling in there for a few weeks, the cartilage and stuff. And my lip, so my tooth went through my lip on the bottom side, and so that's where I had to get stitches. The whale, I don't know what happened to the whale. I'd like to imagine that it was fine. We kind of ramped it. We didn't like crash into it. I didn't really see like too much blood in the water. I think there was a little bit, but yeah, man, it's just a super unfortunate event. And we fixed the boat up luckily, and got back to the dock just fine. But man, it was just such a scary thing. So every time I ran the boat after that, dude, I was just like,
no, the throttles.
Oh, dude. Well, we'd run out some pretty rough stuff, so I had to keep my hand off the throttles. But yeah, if I could, I was hovering, dude.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't worry about to be honest, like, I wouldn't worry about the whale. Like, I've seen animals get propped, and I know, like, the dolphins, but I also know whales, like, their blubber line is so big, so thick, like, I'm sure, I mean, I'm not a vet, but in my minimal experience, it's probably fine. It probably was like, what the fuck was that? But yeah, that's, and got a nick.
You'd like to imagine the whale swam off and limped away with nothing more than some flesh wounds, and they're healed up by now. So yeah, I believe it was a humpback. That's what we have there. It was a big animal, dude. He was a big whale. Like just his dorsal fin was popped up, and part of his spine there, or the top of him, and just that was popped up, and the boat was pretty wide. I'm trying to think. That boat was
8'6"
feet wide. Yeah, it was probably 8 feet wide, and just that portion of him that was popped up was wider than the boat, and that was all I saw of him. So he was a big boy, man. I don't know how long he was, but my guess is he was at least 30 feet long. He was a big boy, so hopefully he was all right. Yeah,
humpbacks get like 70 feet too, or something like that. So I mean,
Dude, yeah, they get big. So
that's one of those animals you see, you want to see in the water, and then when you see them in the water, there's like that primitive fear of like, what the hell? Like, I had that happen. I was like, I'm going to jump in on this fin whale, you know, and jump in, and it's like, come get me now. Get me out of the water now. Quickly, quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, you just you start to play out scenarios in your head, and you're like, man, these things are just so powerful and so awesome. The one time I saw whales, I thought it was a fucking massive trash pile floating underwater, and it's like, that doesn't make any sense, but it was just like the white, he kind of had turned a little bit of his underbelly, and I was like, my goodness, that is a massive whale.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's like seeing a dinosaur, you know? Like, yeah. Well,
epic experience.
So, Paul, how does everybody contact you? Give me all your contact information and let everybody know where to find you and your guns.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people have Instagram, it's just Hotrod Spearguns, so Hot Rod like a car, Hotrod Spearguns. And then email is paul@hotrodspearguns.com. I have a website. It's www.hotrodspearguns.com. I do a lot of my work through Instagram or email. So if guys want to contact me, feel free to DM me. I usually answer within an hour unless I'm asleep. But yeah, man, I'm just, again, like on the gun thing, I love doing it. It's not, I'm not really here for the money, man. To be honest, guns don't make you that much money. Most builders will agree on that. You have to sell a lot of guns to make money. I just love doing it, man. I stay up late. All I'm thinking about is, hey, man, I want this gun to go to a dude who's going to put it to use and slay some big fish with it. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, awesome. No, I know you. I mean, I don't know you that well. We talked a lot over Instagram, and we went on a trip together. And I know your brother, but I know you seem like a very genuine person, and you're a hell of a diver. So thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, Paul.
Yeah, man. Thanks for giving me a shot. I appreciate it, Brett.
Yeah,
hopefully we can dive again soon, brother.
Yeah. All right, man. Have a good night.
You too, man. Talk
to you. All right, buddy. Okay. Bye. Later.